Welcome to Unlikely Intersections, the podcast where intent, impact, and inquiry inspire our conversations. I'm Doc Philip Brown with my good friend Terry Jackson, and you're at the intersection with us. The interesting thing about intersections, of course, is that we all face many intersections daily. The way we navigate these determines the course of our day and our life. Terry, I'm really excited today. We've got a wonderful guest. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about our guest, and then we'll turn it over.
Well, we have with us today none other than Mr. Garry Ridge, who is the recently retired CEO of WD-40. And if you know anything about Garry, if you've had the opportunity to read his book or to do any research on him, you understand that when it comes to employee engagement, his organization, WD-40, had some of the highest employee engagement scores for many, many years, that they exceeded actually the 90 percentile. That's how engaged. That's the type of culture that he was able to develop, or as he called it, the tribe. And with that, we're going to enjoy this conversation today. And of course, our topic is going to be around culture. So, Garry, it's a pleasure to have you.
G'day, good morning. It's great to be with you. Thank you so much for the invitation. Let me give you my preferred introduction, if I may.
Okay.
G'day, I'm Garry Ridge. I'm the recently retired, now refired, consciously incompetent, probably wrong, and roughly right, Chairman Emeritus of WD-40 Company and the Culture Coach.
Awesome. Love it. Love it, Garry. So give us a little bit of background around your travels, your journey to becoming, I guess, CEO of, and when you begin to realize the importance of culture within an organization.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. So I was with WD-40 Company for 35 years, 25 years as the CEO of a public company. So it's been a wonderful journey. I started with them in 1987 in Sydney, Australia, where I opened our Australian subsidiary. I transferred to the United States in 1994 to head up our international expansion program. We wanted to take the blue and yellow can with a little red top to the world because we knew there was lots of squeaks and rust out there that we could help people with. And then in 1997, the then CEO retired. And I was given the privilege and the opportunity to lead the company. And that was kind of the turning point. I remember very clearly October 7th, 1997. And I thought, wow, I was scared but not afraid. In fact, as a US public company, I'd actually never been to Wall Street. So that was probably a good thing. I hadn't been tainted yet by the short-sightedness, but it actually all started. My aha moment was actually on an airplane. I was flying from Los Angeles to Sydney, and I was in the early stages of my CEO role, and I was actually reading some of the work of the Dalai Lama. And in this piece I read, he said, our purpose in life is to make people happy. If you can't make them happy, at least don't hurt them. And I went, well, that makes sense. And funnily enough, at just about the same moments later, I was reading something and I read this quote from Aristotle. Pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. And I thought, my goodness, what is this message I'm getting? If we can create an environment where people know they matter and they know they belong, would they be happier at work? Would they go home happy? And would they create better results? And I thought, wow, that's pretty interesting. I then started to think about how do I learn more about this? So I looked around and I ended up enrolling in a master's degree at the University of San Diego. And that's where I met my dear friend, my mentor, and eventually my co-author, Dr. Ken Blanchard, probably the guru of servant leadership and the 1-minute manager. And in that 2-year master's program, I learned the tools of servant leadership, and I started to apply them at WD-40 Company. And the rest is sort of history. We We've built a wonderful culture, and it's not about me. The three most important words I ever learned in my life were "I don't know," and then getting happy with that was fine. But as you mentioned, Terry, we built a wonderful culture. And when I haven't retired actually. I've refired. I don't like the word retirement. But WD-40 Company today is in 176 countries around the world. We have a last employee engagement survey, which was in March last year. We had employee engagement at 93%. 98% of the people say they love to tell people they work at the company. 96 or 7% say they actually respect their coach, who is their boss. We don't have managers. Words matter. They're called their coach. And it's all because we have a group of people that come together every day to protect and feed each other. Now, interestingly enough, Aristotle was right, because at the same time, over a 25-year period, we 6x the revenue, and the market cap grew from about 200 or 300 million to just near $3 billion. So not only did we have an organization that was sending people home happy, but we had an organization that delivered substantial financial rewards. And, finally, I just sum it up like this. Imagine a place where you go to work every day, you make a contribution to a purpose that's meaningful and bigger than yourself, you learn something new, you're protected and set free by a compelling set of values, and you go home happy. And why is that important? Happy people create happy families. Happy families create happy communities. Happy communities create a happy world. And by golly, we need a happy world. And business has the biggest opportunity ever to do that. So that's a little bit of the story.
Wow, I mean, that's so compelling, and it's amazing. You didn't even really talk about the product itself, right? And for somebody like myself, who, I do a lot of outside work as a hobby, right? I have a couple do tractor work, do all kinds of fixing things, and I wouldn't dream of going anywhere without a couple of cans of WD-40 tucked away, because if you got that and a roll of duct tape, you can buy time to do just about anything in that realm. And
absolutely,
and it's just so, that's so powerful. Now, I heard recently, I saw a little clip by Simon Sinek, who was calling you out in particular as a street whisperer. And I won't get his characterization of that exactly right, but it was something around the fact of some criticism that was going toward quarterly earnings, and you had a pretty powerful response. And I was wondering if you'd share that a little bit with our audience.
Yeah, sure. Simon is a good friend of mine. We met each other about 15 years ago, and I've learned a lot from Simon, so thank you to Simon. Yeah, I think what he was referring to was, this Wall Street, need to create quarterly earnings. And I think he said, if this is the same instance, he said, he would have said that, one time I was on an earnings call with some analysts, and the analyst said, you missed your number this quarter. I said, it wasn't my number, it was yours. My numbers are fine. Thank you. And it really, it gets back to this, short-term thinking. Simon's whole, platform is playing the infinite game, not the finite game. Now, you have to have finite events within the infinite game. Don't get me wrong there. You have to have, clear strategy. There's two things you need in business. You need a very good strategy and a high will of the people. Mm-hmm. And a lot of companies spend a lot of time on developing their strategy, but not enough time on developing the will of the people, or, a high engagement. You can write the best strategic plan in the world. We write a nice strategic plan. We take it to some smart professor at Harvard or wherever. He marks it up and says, congratulations, well done. You've got a great strategic plan. 70 out of 100 for your strategic plan. But if only 20% of your people go to work every day and are engaged and, working towards a purpose and learning and having values, 20 times 70 is 1,400. There's your output. But if 80% of your people, remember what, Aristotle said, if 80% of your people go to work every day and are engaged and working towards a purpose that's meaningful, and you're learning and being protected and set free by values, 80 times 70, or 7 8s are 56, 5,600. Duh. The math is simple.
Very simple.
That's so, it is so powerful. I'd love to hear. So, talk a little bit more about that will of the people, right? Like, because for me, as a person who's been through, the recent thing that we've been through in healthcare, of course, is the pandemic, and what we've seen is a group of team members who are just in a really bad place, right? Like, they're questioning everything that they do. The engagement is at an all-time low. People have left the profession. That kind of tells me that the cultural aspects of what we're doing across the whole industry may be significantly compromised.
Well, again, thank you. It gets back to two things. Do I matter and do I belong? And, one of the biggest desires we have as human beings is to belong. That's why I developed the tribal leadership concept. We think about, tribes go back to the beginning of time, whether it was Ugg the caveman who was out hunting with his mates for for whatever they were going to eat. So belonging is so important. And, belonging is about, do I matter? And am I being, treated with care and candor? And am I being held accountable? And am I being responsible? And Terry, you remember this guy, right?
Yes, I remember that guy. I was just thinking about that guy. I was going to ask you about him.
I'm sorry you were thinking about him. It's not something I'd like you to be thinking about first thing Monday morning. But, this is Al. Al is the soul-sucking CEO of Fear Inc. And as you would think, Fear Inc. has a very, very low employee engagement. In fact, it may even be negative. And here are some of the behaviors that Al has that creates these toxic cultures. Al's ego eats his empathy instead of his empathy eating his ego. It's all about him. He thinks micromanagement is essential. He thinks he's corporate royal, it could be Alice too. Don't get me wrong,
Okay.
They think they're corporate royalty. They have worked their life to absolutely climb up this high ladder of respect in the company. They shall bow down to Al. They love a fear-based culture. They are a know-it-all, a master of control. They have all the answers, particularly the wrong ones. They think learning is for losers. They must always be right. They hate feedback, and they don't follow through on their commitments. Now, I'm sure people listening, watching us today may have met Al or Alice. But it's Al or Alice's behavior that's creating these cultures where people don't feel like they belong. So if you want a culture where people feel like they belong, what really is important to have in that culture? Well, you have to have a people first mindset. It's all about the people. Remember what the Dalai Lama said, in that our purpose in life is to make people happy. Words matter. Let's take the word manager out of our vocabulary, and let's be coaches. Let's think of what a great coach does. A great coach never runs on the field. A great coach never goes to the podium to pick up the prize. A great coach doesn't try and score the goal. A great coach spends time on the sideline, observing the play with one objective. It's to help the player win or get an A. And, that was the basis of the book that I wrote with Ken Blanchard, Helping People Win at Work. Don't mark my paper, help me get an A. So a coach's job is to help someone get an A. The other role of a coach is to spend a lot of time in the locker room. Why? Because the coach's job is to build trust within the locker room. They have to have clearly defined, authentic purposes within an organization, a hierarchical set of values that will protect people and set them free, transparency and a simple vision. And here's the big one. Let's take fear out of an organization by removing the word failure and replacing it with learning moments. This is huge. A learning moment is a positive or negative outcome of any situation that needs to be openly and freely shared to benefit all people. How many people do you hear running down corridors of organizations proudly yelling out, "I'm a failure"? None, because they've hidden that failure because they're afraid of Al, the soul-sucking CEO, of attacking them. So have learning moments. There needs to be belonging and acceptance and security, support, inclusion. And then the 4 pillars of care, candor, accountability, and responsibility. These are the things that we need to work on as leaders to create cultures where people know they matter and know they belong.
You know, Garry, I couldn't agree with you more in all that you said. And it's an easy read and it's easy to listen to. What's most important is for those organizations that are not there, and the majority of them are not there, we know that. How do they get there?
Well, the first thing is a realization that it's all about the people. And, put your ego aside. It's not about you, the leader. It's about in anything you do, if you need the support of people to be your best, what do you need to do? Support the people and have them in a position where they want to support you. So your role as a coach, as I said, it's not about you. You're there to help people win. And if you help people win, they'll help you win. That's why I'm so pleased I was born so stupid.
That's a good one. That's a good one. And you know what? There's probably more CEOs who probably wish that they were born stupid because they have made it all about them versus the organization. Just a little bit of how we met. We met, I guess, several years ago in Phoenix, Arizona, through our mutual friend and mentor, Marshall Goldsmith. And I've learned a great deal from him. And now, of course, Philip has had the opportunity to meet him. But tell us a little bit about Marshall's, I guess, impact on you and how you guys actually met.
Sure. So after graduating from the master's degree at USD, a few years later, I went back to USD and became a professor to teach in that program. And for 16 years, I've taught a class in the Master of Science in Executive Leadership around building corporate culture. And way back then, before I knew Marshall well at all, I got his book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, which is one of the best reflections of Al ever. And I used that as the text in the class. And I knew Marshall lived in San Diego. So on a whim one day, I called him up and he answered his phone. I said, "Hey, Marshall, I'm Garry Ridge. At that time, I was CEO of WD-40 Company, but I'm also a professor, adjunct professor at USD. I'm teaching this class. I use your book as one of the texts in the class. Would you consider coming to my class and talking to my students?" And Marshall probably says now, unfortunately, said yes, so I never let him go after. So for year after year, Marshall would graciously come on a Sunday morning, as Marshall is. He's just a giver, and he would help teach his principles in my class. So we just, over time became friends. And when he was putting together his, he had a dream where he said, he said he was going to retire. And as we know, he didn't. He's busier than ever right now. He said, "I want to get at that stage 15 people and teach them everything I know for free, as long as they commit to doing it as they get older, feeding it forward, paying it forward." So I was at a meeting up at Rancho Santa Fe one day, and Marshall saw the sign that we were there, and he comes bursting into the room, and as Marshall does, "Hey, Garry, hey, Marshall, how are you, blah, blah. Hey, you better sign up for my 15 coaches." I said, what are you talking about? And he told me the story, and I said, "Thanks, Marshall, but I've had the privilege of learning so much from you. I don't want to take a seat from someone else. I can get everything for free from you anytime I want." Marshall went off. So about 2 weeks later, I got a call from one of my co-professors, and they said, "Congratulations, do you see you're in the first 25? I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "You've just been named as one of the 25 in Marshall's group of that he's putting together." And I said, "Really?" So I called Marshall up and I said, "What's the deal?" He said, "I told you you're going to be in this." Which has been fabulous.
Yes.
Which has been fabulous. And, in fact, in a week or two, I'm flying off to Dubai, and Marshall and I are coaching together in Dubai. He's coaching the CEO of a company, and I'm coaching the COO. And I've met many, many great people through the group that you and I are in, Terry. People like Chester Elton, who wrote the book, The Carrot Principle in later times, Anxiety at Work, and Leading with Gratitude. Ron Carusi, who just wrote a great book, one of my favorites, to be honest, is the name of the book, and one of the best I've seen, and a bunch of other people that we form a circle and we just help each other out as we're doing today. That's all we do. We're here to pay it forward and try and make the world a little better place by helping people build organizations where people actually love to go to work.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, what's interesting to me is the fact that you, as the CEO of WD-40, decided to actually teach an MBA course. I can't recall, not to say that it doesn't happen, hearing a CEO talk about teaching a course. What was the impetus behind you teaching the course, and what gifts did you receive from your students as you taught the course? What learnings were there for you?
Well, they say one of the greatest ways to learn is to teach. Yes. And certainly, over the 16 or so years that I've taught at USD and the many leaders that have gone through that program, you learn something every day. And you get to test your theories and have people put it to work. But some of the greatest gifts I've got from that program is actually seeing people go and do it. And why did I do it? Because of the gift that Ken gave me, Ken Blanchard. His gift was to teach in that program, and I took what I learned from him and many of the other professors there at the time, and I decided to do something with it. And in doing something with it, we created a place at WD-40 Company where we were making a positive difference on people's lives. And, life is a gift. We don't want to send it back unwrapped. And a lot of people are not unwrapping life. And as I said, I think business has the biggest opportunity and responsibility ever today to make a positive difference on people's lives, because we touch more people every day than most any other system does. And we need to do something about making the world a better place. This is not a good place right now. And, we need to do something about that. People are getting laid off, and, we're going through these terrible times. And we've just been through this big life lesson of COVID. And look at the way that changed the environment. So we've got to do all we can to help people and create these places, because again, it's life is a gift, and we better treasure it.
Yeah, you said something there that reminds me of another of Ken Blanchard's sort of philosophies that comes out in a different book, and I would consider Ken a paper mentor of mine for a long time. I love his books. They're easy to read. They are pragmatic, but Gung Ho, that he co-authored, and it talks about that the purpose of the company, in that case, the example he uses, really is about what it does for the sense of purpose of the people who are on the team that work there, and then collectively they deliver either a product or they deliver something, but there's this deep sense of meaning for those humans, for the humans that are their families and friends and neighbors, and for the communities that company exists in, that really is the more important purpose of the company than any other.
Absolutely. And we have a job to do, and we should be doing it.
Yeah, we see that, and I think it seems like, and again, another paper mentor, or these in this era, it's more video mentor, Simon Sinek. Although I've read all of his books, I think there's something in there that's very parallel to Ken's perspective there as well, in terms of he just has a different way of saying it. But,
absolutely.
So, and talk a little bit about what that would feel like as a team member, because you've obviously spent a lot of time in cultivating it.
Yeah. So I think how it should feel is around the 4 pillars of care, candor, accountability, and responsibility. So if you're a team member, a tribe member, your leader cares about you. And care is not only rewarding and applauding you for doing great work, but being brave enough to redirect you when you're not moving towards the A. And it's unfortunate that a lot of people protect their own comfort zone at the expense of someone else's development. It's, so they're not brave enough to do that. But great leaders both applaud, reward, and redirect. So care is number one. The second one is candor. And I kind of pinched, or I borrowed this from Simon: no lying, no faking, no hiding. I believe most people in organizations don't lie. I believe they fake and they hide. Why do they fake and hide? Well, because of Al, the soul-sucking CEO, who's, putting fear into the organization. They don't have learning moments. They have mistakes. So you've got to have that area of that. And again, having that coaching mentality around that is very important. Then there's accountability. And that was really the basis of what Ken and I wrote about in helping people win at work. I was in the class with Ken, and he was telling a story about when he was a professor and he used to give out the final paper at the beginning of the class. And the academics said, "What the hell are you doing, Blanchard, giving out the final paper?" He said, "Not only am I giving out the final paper, what am I going to do for the next 3 semesters? I'm going to help them learn the answers." And I went, "Oh, duh." In organizations, most people don't succeed because we haven't been clear about what we're going to hold each other accountable for. And so it's, what do you expect from me? What do I expect from you? Are we going to have the opportunity to have open and honest conversations about that? Are we going to do it regularly with one goal in mind, and that's to help you, the person that I have the privilege to coach and lead, get your A? And if you don't know what the A looks like when it walks in the room, there's no way you're going to get it. So accountability is very important. Then the final one is responsibility. And, we, again, as I said, words matter. And we developed a thing at the company many years ago, and we actually called it the Maniac Pledge. And what it is, it's a pledge of responsibility. And if I may, I'll read it to you.
Yes.
It says, "I am responsible for taking action, asking questions, getting answers, and making decisions. I won't wait for someone to tell me. If I need to know, I am responsible for asking. I have no right to be offended that I didn't get this sooner. And if I'm doing something others should know about, I am responsible for telling them." So a clear pledge of what we're going to hold each other responsible for. So they're the 4 pillars: care, candor, accountability, responsibility, and seeing them in action. It's not about the words. This whole thing is simple. It's not easy. and time is not your friend.
That's right.
You
Never
have to do it consistently. When I was at school many years ago in Australia, my science teacher gave me a Petri dish. And he said, "We're going to grow culture in this Petri dish." I said, "Okay, fair enough. So what's important?" Well, the first thing is, what are the ingredients that you need to put in the Petri dish to grow the culture? That's very, very important. So growing great culture, you need to put, people first mindset, values, purpose, care, candor, account, all that stuff goes in the Petri dish. Now, what do you need to do next? As a leader, you need to watch that Petri dish every day. And you have to feed the good ingredients, and you have to be brave enough to attack the toxins. Because if the toxins get in there, they will send that Petri dish culture sour in a heartbeat. So culture equals values plus behavior times consistency.
It's interesting, and we talk about culture, and people, when leaders talk about culture in organizations all the time. But the real work that needs to go into creating, maintaining, sustaining culture, that's the work that I don't see a lot of. They begin to look at what the expense will be of maintaining that culture versus what the investment is within the organization moving forward for the culture that's needed to continue to thrive. How can we get past, and not that expense is somewhat of an obstacle, but how can we get past looking at it as an expense for organizations versus an investment?
Well, I don't think it is an expense that's really something that is not workable. It's a commitment. That's what it is. It's not expensive to have a clearly defined purpose. It's not expensive to have a clearly defined set of values that protect people and set them free. It's not expensive to have an attitude of care, candor, accountability, and responsibility. What it takes is commitment. And a lot of organizations think you can go and do some training course, bring in some consultant, some expert. They'll sprinkle some fairy dust over your organization and pew, you have
Chia pet.
That's
chia
it.
pet. Now you have culture. Doesn't work that way. It's the foundations that are important. Do you have again, the foundations are so important, and it's really these things. Do you have a dedication to people? Do you have a clearly defined purpose? Are your values in place? Do you have a mindset of learning moments instead of failure? And are those 4 foundations there? Care, candor, accountability, and responsibility. That's it. That's the model. And if you and then you have to do it every day. And these things don't cost a lot. This is not a multi-million-dollar program. It's simple basics. Remember I said this is simple, not easy, and time is not your friend.
Yeah, it's so powerful. I want to go back. You were talking about the 4 components and the responsibility, accountability, and what it takes to get there. And you kind of touched on it. One of the definitions I've always thought around accountability is what is the team counting on me for, right? So I kind of think that accountability is the person, right? Like what they need to bring to the whole, that delivers a tremendous amount into their sense of purpose, right? Because when they feel needed, because they are, then, and there's clarity, then magic happens almost. But with all that said, you talked a little bit about the courage component of coaching and the obligation to say, this is what it looked like. And from the standpoint of, we all have different temperaments, talents, and convictions. And you mentioned not a lot of people were willing to do that part because it took them out of their comfort zone. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about developing that courage as a leader to have those conversations and how you nurture that in yourself or in, other, middle leaders and so forth.
It's love. It's absolute love. And I'll tell you why. I was one of those persons who was protecting my comfort zone at the expense of other people's development because, I didn't want to have those crucial conversations from time to time. And then something hit me a few years ago. It is that the more I love and care for someone, the more important that conversation is. Because if I'm truly committed to them, stepping into the best version of their personal self, as long as there's no, sad agenda in my conversation, it's my responsibility to have that conversation. And that's where values come into play in an organization. And I give you a very, very simple example on that. At WD-40 Company, our second value, and our values were hierarchical. Our first value was we value doing the right thing. Our second value is we value creating positive, lasting memories in all of our relationships. So one time, some time ago, I was in a meeting, and one of the tribe members in a meeting early in the morning was not creating positive, lasting memories. They were having one of those toxic moments where whatever happened to them that morning was not benefiting those who were in the room. So what do you do as a leader? Well, option A is you stop the meeting and you inject fear by reprimanding him. That's not going to work because everybody else in the room, next time there's a meeting, will be saying, am I going to get the arrow today if I misbehave, if that's it? Second thing, you do nothing. That's not going to work because now you're not doing your responsibility as a leader. So you've got to have that conversation. So the meeting ended and I said to this person, hey, let's go for a walk. So we walked out of the building, and to add some kind of cooling to the situation, I started to look behind a car, and I looked in a trash can, and I looked behind a bush, and the person said, "What the hell are you doing?" So I'm looking for you. The you I know and love was not in that room today. What's on your mind? What's getting in your way? How can I help you? And we opened up and had a conversation, which was the person that had just a lot of incidents happened that morning that had soured the morning. So that's when the coach walked into the room and said, well, blah, blah, blah. And we had a coaching session. And at the end of it, we hugged, and the person went back inside, and I saw them go to a few people that were at the meeting and say, "Hey, that wasn't me in the meeting today." And they say, "We know the person we love, you weren't there." And so, I think you've got to be brave enough to have those conversations, but you've got to have a platform to be able to enter them. And that's why having values that you can act on within an organization is so important. Because I was able to say, that one of our values is to create positive, lasting memories. And that wasn't happening today.
Garry, you mentioned a word that's extremely important to all of us, but very rare do we hear it in a corporate setting. I've heard you and one other CEO talk about this word a great deal, and that CEO was Alan Mulally, who was he was the chief executive officer of Ford Motor Company, and he mentioned the word, as you did, love. It's rare that you hear that in a corporate setting from a CEO. And I remember asking Alan, when did you begin to understand the impact of love in the corporate setting? And I'm going to ask you that same question, because I think there's fear around interjecting the word love into a corporate setting.
Absolutely. The other person who uses it is Bob Chapman from Barry Weinmiller. And I learned something from what he said. And he said, just remember, everybody who walks into your operation one day is someone's precious child. And I would add to that, there's someone's precious child, husband, wife, brother, sister, auntie, or uncle. And, a lot of people take that word love as being soft. Well, it's not. It's deep caring for someone. And if you have a deep caring, what do you want? Well, you want them to be successful. You want to help them learn. You want to help them grow. A lot of people think that this culture thing is all about popcorn, pizzas, and singing Kumbaya. It's not. This is hard.
Yes, it is.
Hard. This is hard, but it's very rewarding. And, if anything we can do on our, little journey down the path of life is to help people, in some way, then life's been a gift to us.
I want to take a second and just say, wow, thanks for that. That hits me at a really, really interesting and good time for me in my life, that the love is such an important part of leadership, even in the corporate world. And for me, as a person who was trained as a surgeon, love has been a part of everything I've always done for patients, right? Even though, let's face it, surgery hurts people. But it's a lot like that tough conversation, right? Like it's for the greater good, right? It's for the trying to have the goal of getting back to better health, and being able to navigate those things is really important. So, in my leadership, I've always felt that, but I can't say I've been comfortable saying it. But when somebody, as prestigious as the two of you guys, fellow MG100 coaches, and Bob Chapman, another paper mentor, and Alan Mulally say, are willing to say it openly, that gives me, number one, it lays out the challenge to me that, hey man, it's okay to put that language into your work leadership, and it also says it's an aha moment for me in healthcare, because I'm just realizing now how absent that word is in things that we do, even though so many of us actually feel it. It's fascinating. I've got a book coming out in just a couple of months, and that is one of the concepts in there. That is one of the aha moments about that, the love that underlies the relationship with the person you're taking care of. But the aha moment that's hitting me now is that, in leadership, whether it's corporate America, whether it's, a family or whatever, it is that love, and it's something that we ought to actually be talking about front and center as we go forward. So thank you for that. That's powerful.
Yeah, it's amazing how much courage you get from love, because it was that moment for me where I was protecting my comfort zone, but I really realized it's love that's going to give me the courage to have that conversation, because I'm going into this conversation with one thing in mind, and that's for that person to be able to step into the best new person they possibly can. And if I love them enough, I have to be brave enough to have that conversation.
Absolutely. Now that you are the refired individual that you are, a refired CEO, what are some of the learnings since you've been refired that you've gained from working with clients, working with others, now that you've had the chance to kind of step back as the CEO of WD-40?
Well, I said I've just finished my 25-year apprenticeship in leadership, so it's time for me to get serious about that. But some of the learnings that I have had I'm coaching about 4 or 5 CEOs at the moment is they all have the same issues. I mean, and the role of a CEO is a pretty lonely role. Number one, they're the only person in the organization who knows everything, and not always can they do anything about everything. So that's important. But the other thing is that many people have these attributes that they're unaware of, and transparency is so important, particularly in the environment we're in now, where if things are not moving in the direction that people would like them to, they tend to not be as transparent. And it's funny, I was in New York last week, and I was having a conversation with someone last week, and we were talking about transparency. And it's interesting, we have the fine doctor on with us today, because I said, can you imagine what would happen if you went to the doctor and you weren't transparent about the pain you had? Do you think the doctor would have any chance of being able to diagnose some treatment to be able to help you feel better? So in an organization, if you're not being transparent and sharing the pain that the organization's having, how could you have any confidence that all those people who could help you would help you if they didn't know? And it's, again, I think, so the other learning is transparency is really important. And right now we're going through in life a period of uncertainty, and a friend of mine is Dr. Rebecca Homkes. She was a professor at London Business School, a strategic advisor, and she shared with me a reflection on uncertainty. And she said it's a series of future events that may or may not occur.
That's right.
And in most circumstances, most of them don't occur. But if you think about it right now in business, what's happening is we're going through a lot of turbulence. And if you think about turbulence in the aspect of flying in a plane, if you're in a plane, you have headwinds and tailwinds, and the pilot can either take advantage of either of those. But turbulence is unexpected, and it's wild, and it's rough, and it's unstable, it's unsettled, it's chaotic. You don't know how long you're going to be in it. You don't know how dramatic it's going to be. And so that's what we're going through right now in business, is this turbulence and uncertainty. And through all that, we as leaders have to be that steady course. We have to be that steady course. We have to, move ourselves through this and not react to, that uncertainty that may or may not occur. Have a clear plan, have a good strategy, take care of your people, be transparent, move through it. We'll get through this, and we'll get to the other side.
Yeah, that uncertainty definition kind of reminds me of a quote that I've always heard attributed to Abraham Lincoln. And I've been through many terrible things in my life, some of which actually happened.
I love it. That's beautiful. I gotta hang on, I need my pen.
Absolutely. One of our good friends also, Dr. Price Pritchard, talks about ambiguity and uncertainty. And what it made me realize during the pandemic is that uncertainty and ambiguity always exist. It has always existed. The pandemic brought it to a visceral level for us.
Yeah.
And we didn't pay attention to all of the uncertainty that we face on a day-to-day basis. So one of the things I'm big on is from leadership to culture to navigating uncertainty and ambiguity. How do we begin to teach this to younger kids such that when they join organizations, we don't have as much teaching to do? It's more of the commitment to the continued cultivation of, because we talk about accountability, and often people aren't taught accountability in their regular lives. It's only when we get to the organization that we continue to hear about accountability. How do we make that a part of a person's life at a very early age? Because that's where the solutions are. If you catch people early and you teach them what they need to know early, then we don't have to do anything but nurture and cultivate them as they move along in life, versus trying to take an adult who's never been accountable, strip them down, deconstruct them, and all of a sudden we're going to teach them to be accountable. How do we do that?
That's a great question. And I wish I had the answers, but I have a theory. Where do kids learn from? Their parents and those around them.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think they think when the person that their mother, their father, whoever goes home every night and says, I hate my job, my boss is a jerk, do you think they're going to go, I really want to be part of that. I can't wait to go out. I can't wait to go out and be part of that jerk organization, right? How do you get me a ticket to that? So again, I think, one of the things we need to do is help create these environments where people come and say, yeah, I really love where I work today. And the dinner table, they're talking about, we're held accountable. They may not use that word, but I think, kids are a reflection of the environment that they exist in. So how do we fix that environment?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's such a powerful, I personally believe there, and you said it earlier, right? Like there's a powerful need to belong, right? And folks want to belong to things that are special, that keep them safe, that allow them to thrive. So it sounds like your theory is definitely tracking with key opportunities that we have.
When I started thinking about tribes, I looked at the tribal behaviours of some Indigenous groups, particularly the Australian Indigenous population and the Fijian Indigenous population. And if you look at some of the attributes, the number one responsibility of a tribal leader is to be a learner and a teacher. And let me give you the example. If we were to turn back the clock and go thousands of years back to my homeland, Australia, and be observing a group of Indigenous Australians at a tribal meeting, what would the tribal leader be doing? The tribal leader would be teaching the younger tribe members to throw a boomerang. Why? Because the boomerang was the tool of survival. And if they weren't proficient at using the boomerang, their chances of healthy survival were probably low. So what a lot of leaders don't get right is their number one responsibility is to be a learner and a teacher. That's it. Learning and teaching is the number one responsibility of a tribal leader. And then, of course, there's other attributes. Belonging, that's one of the biggest desires we have as human beings. And when we talk about belonging, you think about Maslow's hierarchy to self-actualization. The first two rungs of that are basically, do I have what I need to survive and am I safe? The third one is loving or belonging. That's where most organizations fall down because they don't, you can't get to self-actualization if you don't go up the pyramid. But they stall there because of this guy or girl.
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow. It has been just an incredible, generous sharing of your time, Garry. We cannot possibly thank you enough for taking this time with us. And I personally could go on with this conversation, I feel like, for hours and hours, and love learning from you and appreciate what you're sharing with our audience. I guess as we kind of try to wrap up, what are the key learnings you'd love to share with our listeners if you had to leave them with just one or two things that they would take home with them and put into practice, into play in their lives?
Well, as far as leadership's concerned, it's not about you. It's about what you can do to help others. And, you know, my final thing is always, life's a gift. Don't send it back unwrapped. Get out there and do some unwrapping. You know, we have the greatest opportunity. But, you know, the thanks today is to you for allowing me to come here and share some of my scar tissue and some of my learning moments, because what I have is only what I've learned along the way, and we need to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
And we can do that if we make, you know, create organizations where people go to work every day, they make a contribution to something bigger than themselves, a purpose that's meaningful. They learn something new, they feel safe and are protected by a compelling set of values, and they go home happy. Because happy people create happy families create happy communities create a happy world, and by golly, we need a happy world.
Yeah, and we wanted to, without you making sure that our audience didn't miss this, your book. You know, if you happen to have it, maybe hold it up so the listeners can see. I know I have read it personally 4 times and get something else out of it each time, helping people win at work. It's just a great adage. And isn't it amazing, Terry, how, you know, Garry gets here and he says the number one responsibility of a tribal leader is a learner and a teacher. And we asked him the important things, and he started with what he had learned over the years, and then has been teaching us the whole time.
Yep.
I mean, that's living, you know, that's living what you say.
That's
Perfect
right.
consistency.
That's right. Yeah, and we're grateful again for you sharing your time with us, because we'll let the audience know you're in San Diego, so it's very still early for you, even though you're an early morning person. So we thank you very much for the gifts and the nuggets of gold that you've been able to share with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And for our listeners, even though this is live, it's also going to live on our YouTube channel, which you can pick up at Unlikely Intersections. It's going to live on our website at unlikelyintersection.com. And so we hope you'll reach out and listen. There are so many pearls from Garry in this one that I myself am going to go back and listen to it several times, because I couldn't take notes furiously enough.
And if people want to follow me, please follow me on LinkedIn, because I'm often posting articles and sharing learning there. So Garry Ridge, Garry Ridge at LinkedIn. You'll find me there, and love you to follow me and help, and so I can continue to share some of my scar tissue with you.
Thank you so very much. And where can we find you, Dr. Brown?
LinkedIn is a good place for me too, Dr. Philip Brown.
You can find me, Terry Jackson, a PhD at LinkedIn, and thank you. And we know that you have learned a great deal from Garry Ridge today.